Imposter syndrome is something that hooks many of us into an idea that we're not good enough. And by definition, maybe you've heard about it, it basically means it's a situation of an intellectual form of self-doubt where we start to really get in our heads, we start to worry that our accomplishments don't really measure up to today's standards. We feel a sense of underperformance, feel a sense of self-scrutiny or worry that maybe we didn't deserve the spot that we have within an academic institution, for example. We didn't deserve our job, that if only people really knew the real us and they discovered that they would just be blown away at how bad we are. And a word sometimes that you could think of is like a wannabe or a fraud or a phony. And this is something that is a reality in today's landscape where it feels like it's never enough. No matter how much we accomplish, there's always going to be more to do. And in fact, when we sort of connect the dots between imposter syndrome and perfectionism, we see some new links coming up in the literature. So one example of this is that in the past 10 years, perfectionism has actually gone up by 33%. And the driving force behind that is social comparison. And beyond that, even the fastest growing anxiety spectrum situation or disorder of today is social anxiety. So connecting the dots to imposter syndrome, if you're living in this space where you're marinating in anxiety, you're experiencing a great deal of self-doubt, you're going to have these blockages where you feel so worried about your performance that you're actually not able to be present in your work, in your relationships, and in your life. And one thing that's really important as we seek to deconstruct imposter syndrome or kind of put it in its place is that we have to recognize some of why it happens. Now, I've mentioned perfectionism and social comparison as driving forces, but there's also some social disparities that come into play. So when we look at who is affected by imposter syndrome, for example, we know it happens disproportionately in STEM fields, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. It happens there quite often. It happens in high achieving, high performing roles for folks. But it also happens to certain groups. It happens to people disproportionately because of race, because of class, because of gender, because of sexual orientation and age, and any of these other kinds of categories where sort of there are this in and out group situation or historic and current tide of marginalization, discrimination, and oppression. So it's sort of this whole thing of like a dominant group kind of came to this decision of what was good or what the metric should be, or sort of defining it for the whole, even though that doesn't always fit, or also many times we have barriers to access in our lives, in our professional and personal lives. So it's very important when we think about imposter syndrome that we recognize that some of us face particular risks. And we also see, again, within this hyper-competitive market, many of us feeling insecure. And one of the things that can help us to really put this in its place, like anything in psychology, one of my favorite things about psychology and behavior science is it helps us to name phenomena. It helps us to put a name to something that many of us experience in our human condition. And one thing I love to say in my work is it's not just mental health condition or a syndrome, right? It's not just this kind of condition, it's a human condition. Any of us, as we're out setting out to improve our careers, to upskill, to engage in life in thoughtful and meaningful ways, to set goals and to reach them, those are all tall orders, right? There's a lot that's at hand that presses upon us. And what we have to really recognize is that we're all at a point in our development. We know what we know. We don't know what we don't know. But this is what connects us in our shared humanity. When you look at, let's say you decide you're going to look at someone's resume or their CV. And let's say they're like 10 years ahead of you chronologically or maybe just situationally. They've reached certain steps. In your first reaction when you look at their work, it might make you feel like you're going to faint. It might make you feel like you want to bite your nails, or you just sort of have this whole shame kind of thing come over you. But what's important, again, is we have to watch out for comparisons. Comparisons can make us, just feel ashamed, feel like we have to show up airbrushed, feel that we can't be our true selves, or that we can't acknowledge insecurity or fear. What I think is really important in our world, and I think I'm seeing a lot of evidence of people being more brave about telling all the sides of their stories. You could say on one hand, I feel very accomplished, I feel like I'm on the right track, I feel like I'm doing well, and all at the same time I feel doubtful, I feel hard on myself, I feel that inner toxic critic creeping up on me. But it's okay, because that's, again, just part of our experience as we're working towards our goals, as we're engaging in life, as we're trying to make important contributions in our respective fields. It's scary. It's scary. And I think what we know about resilience and dismantling these kinds of mindsets is we need to have space for honest conversation, where even in our own mind's eye, we can be honest that all the things can be true at the same time. It's not a moral failing. It doesn't mean we don't belong or we can't continue to grow. And this is an awesome thing in brain science, brain plasticity. We can continue to regenerate ourselves, to grow, to learn, to unlearn, to relearn throughout our lifespan. And that's really, something that's amazing as we think about the spirit of Northeastern, that lifelong learning model. That's what this is about. So even if at first you show up and you feel like there's more skills to learn, or you don't know everything, or you feel intimidated, that's okay, because that's how we all feel when we first come onto the scene. And then we rethink that. We recognize our worth, our value. We turn to thinking about our strengths and away from hyper-focusing on our perceived weaknesses. We seek out community. We find mentors. We find people in our lives that also can acknowledge the duality of their narratives, those two sides of the story. And we can get to a better place together of recognizing all of our voices matter, we all belong, and we're all capable of making infinite contributions to our professional and personal worlds. That as leaders, really, we don't have to hold a position of power or have all the right words, but we can bring tremendous influence on our circles. And that kind of influence has an amazing contagion effect on our whole ecosystem, really. Everyone around us can be influenced by the way we're showing up, maybe more honestly, more vulnerable, in ways that feel like they have to be perfectionistic or very contrived or very curated. We can show up with all the sides of ourselves, with recognizing it's okay to have more questions than answers, and show up in a way that's curious and intentional versus curated and fearful.